broadcasting live from the headquarters of Probe Pyramid, from we're on the Riverside studio today, the Westside Riverside studio, and we're broadcasting live over the East Harlem Community Radio Network. And all of those people who are listening to us and can listen to us, we're just talking a little bit today about the show that we used to do called Issues in Sports and some of our work around the community. And what we brought together a couple of current WHCR broadcasters, Mr. Stu Reed, who's here on board with us. Say hi, Stu.
Good afternoon. There are listeners out there in EHCR land.
And of course, we're here with the voice of clarity,
Heyward Dotson, and I should correct you, it's the former voice of clarity, but now I speak only the unbridled, unsolicited, and the uncontained truth about the community and about sports.
Wow, Professor. Well, of course, one of our buddies, Mr. Zachary Cornell Hudson. Did I say that right? Husser. Mm-hmm. As you recall, his email was at Issues in Sports. Issues in Sports at AOL.com. That was his email. And of course, correspondingly, that was the name of the show that we did, which was called Issues in Sports. And we set up the email, we asked Zach to set up the email so that we would have it for the show. And of course, Zach decided to have it. He decided that he was Issues in Sports, as it turned out. And he made a pretty good use of it, I must say. He kept it going pretty good. And a lot of the things I thought was interesting, a lot of the stuff that we did, Clarity, chime in, was surrounded around the fact that we were like a bunch of ex-athletes doing locker room talk.
That's right, and the nice part about it for me was that we brought the locker room right into Harlem. We brought the locker room right into the nicer buildings in Harlem. We brought the locker room up to CCNY, and that had never really, to my knowledge, been done, although we had always had, with Von Harper and some others, a lot of music people, a lot of jazz people, but we brought that sport issue, the Knicks in particular, and basketball in general were our main focuses, but we brought sports into the Harlem community living rooms.
Okay, so all right, since the reason why we called you the voice of clarity, I want to take credit for coining that name. Otherwise, you could say that you self-named yourself. I'm sure, if appropriate, you would. You're the interesting thing about it. So we had yourself, who had a pretty good sports background. You want to talk a little bit about that? Give you a little sports resume?
I just want to speak a bit about the voice of clarity reference. One reason I was the voice of clarity was because we had the rather unclear, opinionated Michael George on the show. And so there was always enlightenment for the listener because our positions were so extreme. And that's just like the Harlem community. Go down 135th Street to Lenox, and you find 4 or 5 different opinions about everything.
No, we're simulcasting, my bad. We're simulcasting here. We're simulcasting, and my bad. We had those of you who are listening to us over East Harlem Community Radio. The bumper came on, the announcement came on, which I wasn't paying attention to because I was so busy listening to you. So you were saying about our how you got the title. You said that there was a truculent misanthrope working with us who went to the Broadside School of Science. I think that's what.
But also wrote for the New York Post and is a published author himself. And I understand he might soon be a movie maker in the mold of the best movie makers we have, Spike Lee and some others, Michael George. And if Mike is listening at this stage out in California, welcome back, Michael, to Harlem, USA, where it all happens.
We should, yeah, well, you know, I thought about calling him and putting him on the air with us, but, you know, who needs equivocation, you know what I mean? Who, one of my favorite comments about Michael George is that even though he was a great researcher and everything and wrote in the Post, he would argue with you a lot and equivocate. He would almost equivocate, I'd say, out of 10 times he would equivocate 11.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's his that was his Bronx High School.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting the distinguishing between Bronx High School science and your high school, which was...
Well, mine was, of course, Stuyvesant.
Of course.
And we started out as an industrial training school. So naturally, I was a little bit more worldly and earthly based, particularly for the nicer crowd, because I, unlike Michael George, I believe, lived in a nicer housing developments throughout my life.
Oh, you're the project kid.
Markham Homes on Staten Island.
Big up to the Markham Homes.
And then the West Brighton houses on Staten Island.
You lived in 2 projects?
In 2 projects.
What project did you live in, Stu?
Off-White houses.
What's the name of it?
Off-White.
Off-White houses.
Off-White houses, the same houses that Carl and Louis Stokes came up in.
Oh, you mean
Cleveland, Ohio.
The first black mayor in...
First black mayor of a major city.
In America.
Right, and councilman, U.S. Congressman Louis Stokes, his brother.
Oh, they came all out of
Off-White houses.
Wow. Well, I didn't come for the project.
Well, that's why we had this focus and affinity
tenement boy.
That's why we had this focus and affinity for the NYCHA tenants and trying to satisfy what they needed to know. And of course, we focused somewhat on sports, but issues were very, very important, particularly landlord-tenant issues, and particularly contemporary issues involving city policy.
And the police.
And then, some of which were, of course, involving the New York City Police.
That's right. And I remember that you gave out a lot of good information on housing court because of your jurisprudence. Is that the right term? What is it? Mm-hmm. Because your jurisprudence background. So you gave out some good information about lawyering when Michael George wasn't attempting to try to show that he was smarter than you, which I don't think he was. I don't think he ever proved that. You know, but
well, it wasn't about that so much as showing the residents and the listeners to our show that there were differences of opinion, that there were articulate people, particularly African American men, who could talk about those issues, and that the things they talked about would be beneficial to the lives of the residents. And so we were engaged in what I would call severe and really good public policy and public advocacy, and that was important to all of us as young men. And back then, we were relatively young.
Yeah, we were. And the thing that struck me was we were on the Sunday after the 9/11. I remember when we did that. That was pretty interesting, to say the least. I thought those are things, big things I remember. I thought the thing with John Isaac's whole involvement with the show at 90-something years old. You know,
John, of course, being one of the original Harlem Wrens.
World Championship, you know, he was we used to call him he was the Kobe Bryant before Kobe Bryant. He was the boy, we used to call him the Boy Wonder, because that was his nickname. He was the boy, because he was 17 years old in 1936. Everybody would say 1939. And he kept correcting all of us to go, no, 1936. And since that, he died. But after he died, they did a Netflix documentary about him, and we were lucky enough to have him in there every week. Well, he would come in, take a nap, because he was like 90-something, and he'd take a nap for a half an hour, and then he would get up, and he had a steel trap mind. and he would talk about all kinds of stuff that most people didn't know. Like, he grew up in Harlem. In the early 1900s, he was around with the Cotton Club. He was playing for the Harlem Wrens when Harlem was at its heyday.
That's right.
And of course, we asked him the very big and most important question: could Langston Hughes play any ball? He could not. But to be talking to somebody who actually knew Langston Hughes, when you could ask him that, I thought was interesting. And I thought how spry he was. I used to ride home with him after every show in his car.
And he also knew Adam Clayton Powell Sr.
Correct.
Which I thought was a very interesting aspect of all that he was about, because John Isaacs was one of those people who seemed to be aware of everything around them, and whenever possible incorporated the very best of the things that were around him. Yeah. And he took a lot of good things out of the Harlem community.
He was a really you could see by his funeral, everybody from basketball was there.
That's right.
At his you could tell that there was some kind of royalty at his particular funeral. But I thought it was just interesting. Some of the I remember when they had mentioned there was some talk that Colin Powell was going to be doing some. They were going to name one of the schools or something after Colin Powell, and something that came down that the school didn't want to create any acrimony around Colin Powell and his mass weapons of mass. This whole George Bush stuff. So, John comes in, and they didn't want us to get into any controversy because people were calling Colin Powell Uncle Tom, and we were asked not to be a part of the controversy, because we have a talk show and blah, blah, blah. So since we were asked, not necessarily, we were asked, the show was asked, I thought it would be, since we couldn't do it, I thought it would be a good idea. And when John woke up from his nap and he started talking, I said, John, since we can't talk about it, but since you're 97 years old, you probably know Uncle Tom when you see one, wouldn't you? He said, sure do.
I think he even implied he knew the original
Uncle Tom, yes. So he said, so what do you think about Colin Powell? He said, Uncle Tom. Next question. So we didn't get in no trouble before that. But that was the kind of insight that we had with John. In fact, the thing that I remember, John, when he would talk about his travels, because they were in barnstorming. If you go on YouTube, they had this, you see this 1930-something bus that they parked out in front of the Harlem, the Renaissance building, which they would travel around in. And he would tell us about traveling around the country back in those days. And the thing that struck me the most that I've never forgotten, he said, we was going to Washington, D.C., and it was segregated. And I was stunned. I kept saying, I did not know that in the 1930s and 1940s that Washington, D.C. had segregated bathrooms, segregated drinking water stuff, and they would always make it seem like it was somewhere in bumfuck Alabama.
Into the 50s, into the 1950s.
Well, no, we didn't. Well, the thing I was just impressing upon you was that how stunned I was that Washington D.C. was in it, and he brought it up. Everybody was like, some people already knew, like maybe yourself and Clarity, but we were like, what? And then he also explained what cages mean. We didn't know what that meant. Basketball cages, and he said explained to us that basketball they were playing in cages.
That's right.
And I don't know if you remember that guy who came in there who gave us all of their gear. Remember the guy? There was some guy some entrepreneur guy came on the show. He had came up and found all of the athletic materials that the people in John and them era wore. And some of the basketball uniforms had long sleeves. And we was going, what are you doing long sleeves? John would go, because we played in cages. And then when you was running down there and they hitting the cage, they would throw the ball off the cage and everything. Who knew? You heard cages, but you never saw pictures. I went and looked on YouTube and saw a couple of pictures of them, very rare. So we learned that from him. We learned how they ate, how they played stupid when they were traveling around in the southern part, how they
part of the country,
how they simped on, simp on the white people. As in simple sign.
Well, Doug, the situation was that we were not first-class citizens, and teams like Harlem Wrens and even the early Harlem Globetrotters, they were first-class basketball players, first-class basketball teams. And so finally, in the late 60s, obviously, we got to a situation where many of us, including my parents, myself, felt that we started to be treated under the laws of the United States as equal citizens. Now, this wasn't easy. We still faced discrimination, but the law was on our side. And I remember it was John who inspired me to talk about, instead of Negro Americans, African Americans, he told me that I should think of talking about people as American Africans, American Latinos, American Asians, because that kept the laws of this country clearly in focus for all people, including the white folks who tended to forget that the laws applied to anyone but themselves.
What a treasure he was. I mean,
He certainly was.
To have that guy that could go back like that. Because remember, I used to always ask him about, well, first of all, he played against John Wooden.
That's right.
That's all he was. Mm-hmm. He played against Red Auerbach.
Joe
He would talk shit. Joe
Lapchick too.
I thought the interesting funny was he would talk shit about Red Auerbach, but not John. I'm talking about playing wise, but not Wooden. When it came to the politics, he would not say any. Couldn't give him say nothing bad about Red. He wouldn't do it for some reason. And he never would say why that was, even though he had expressed clearly that he was a better player than both of them. Mm-hmm. But he, we couldn't get him to go off on him. So, but I thought he was a wonderful archive of information, and I still got that guy. He gave me a leather coat. I still have that leather jacket, the original Ren's.
I remember that.
And John signed it. I got this stuff at home. Still have it.
Mm-hmm. I have a couple of the documents and a photograph poster that he signed of.
That's right. Of all the Ren's. That's right. The guy came in on. I can't remember that. That guy was really
That's
something.
still here in Pro Pyramid Archives.
I think Zach found that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Zach, man, listen. Zach, the interesting thing about him, I thought
that's Zachary Cornell Husser, for those of you who don't know. And we are still mourning his passing about 10 days ago because of the contributions he made, not only to the Harlem community, not only to the Columbia University community, but also to other places like Wilmington, Delaware, and Columbia, South Carolina, where he was, near which he was born.
Yeah,
but Zach Husser was, in fact, you talk about a race man. Zach Husser, to me, was the epitome of what we might call today a race man in the old-fashioned sense.
And you really demonstrated that at his funeral, by the way. Thought you were marvelous there. Particularly when John Isaac's son was sitting right next to us, who you didn't speak to, by the way. I just thought I'd throw that out there in case he's listening. But let me just say this about Zach. I was with Darryl T. Downing, who would call into the show on from an undisclosed location, which was his little gimmick. And he said, you guys were, he was talking to me, and it wasn't about you. He was talking to me and Michael George, who said that we were mean to Zach. And I said to him, are you kidding me? Me? I thought I was...
Well, it was a general consensus that if anyone was mean to Zach Husser, or mean to anyone else who might have called the show, it was you, Doug.
I didn't think so. I thought I was a wonderful pusher of the buttons, and I thought that Zach was a extremely wonderful community-based pain in the ass, and he might have been one of the best pain in the asses that I've ever met in my whole fucking life.
And his overflow funeral ceremonies
showed that. He had a king's funeral. Yeah, he did.
He filled up the theater down at the Canaan Baptist Church. Filled it up.
I remember him asking me, this is why I came up with that pain ass thing. I remember him calling me up one day and said, Dougie, I want you to go with me to pick up a washing machine for my very lovely Joni. I said, okay. And of course, I was in my house, and of course, after I said it, I said, I don't want to do this. You know what I'm saying? So, my phone rings, and he's there at the time that he says, and he says, come down, Dougie. I go downstairs, and I get in the car, and he says, okay, so what do you want to do first, Dougie? And I said, I want to go back up in my house and get the fuck away from you. And he said, and he looked at me, I said, you are the one that's a friend who's a pain in the ass. So don't ask your friend who's helping you, who doesn't want to help you, but only helping you because his friend, what does he want to do? Because he doesn't want to be here. I said, if you don't hurry up and drive off, I'm getting out.
Well,
he pulled right on up.
as is your wont, you showed Zach and many of the rest of us what the word tolerance meant, because you were tolerated despite your idiosyncrasy.
What are we talking about?
And even now, I'd like to say that thanks to Zach Husser, among others, Stu Reed, Zach Husser, Pro Pyramid Archives has a complete selection of the tapes from Issues and Sports.
But let me tell you
So
something.
if any of our listeners wish to hear the old broadcast, just get in touch with Pro Pyramid Archives to do so.
Well, we're going to do the best we can to try to get some of those, because there was quite a few shows that we did that I thought were really great. Like one when we figured out, we researched all of the black quarterbacks that ever was in the NFL. I thought that was really a dynamic. The show that we did with all those doctors that came on there trying to talk about we were the transplant doctor from Westchester came in. He had his head transplant nurse. We had an internist doctor from L.A. We had Dr. Deeds, the TV doctor. Zach did all of this. Zach, unbelievable. We said all these guys were on there. And of course, Zach got very nervous when I asked the doctors if there was a scientific way to attach a head of someone who had a paralyzed body onto somebody who was brain dead. And I don't know why you guys are laughing about that. Why are you laughing? I actually asked him.
Well, it smacks of Frankenstein.
No, it didn't. Because if you recall, I qualified this by asking them not to see if they could discard the ethics of my question beforehand and think about the ethics of how we would go, and if someone's brain dead, we'll harvest every piece of his body with no regard, but we'll allow someone who's paralyzed from the neck down to just waste away, who has a body who's not going to work, can't do anything for anybody. And then we'll take and harvest somebody's brain dead like they're a piece of chicken, and then throw the rest of the carcass away, literally. And I thought that didn't make any sense. Did they have the technology? This is how I pose the question. Do you have the technology to do it without going sci-fi on it? And of course, everybody laughed like y'all did. And after some cajoling, he admitted that they probably did have that. But then he acknowledged that it was, Frankenstein and all this other stuff. But I thought it was a great question, and it was a great interview amongst, with questions that you don't usually ask them. And then I thought the most funniest thing out of all of us on the show, guess who was the only one who was a organ donor? The misanthrope.
Well, you have to find love wherever you can get it done. You have to find love wherever you can get it. One of the things that I liked about Zach is that I consider him a precursor of today's modern technology, because Zach was able to keep literally hundreds of people involved, up to date, knowledgeable about certain things. And now we have phones, cameras, iPads, and the rest that do the same thing. But they all lead to a better awareness among our people about the issues that affect their lives.
Yeah, he was a pretty, well, I'll tell you what. One time we sent him because we saw that he had this innate ability to talk to strangers, which I found very disconcerting. his talking to strangers stuff, particularly when you were walking around with him. Particularly when you've been in the athletic stuff that we've been in, you ain't really into like talking to everybody you see,
That's right.
But he was, and so we said okay. We sent him to, because he knew Serena's. Well, he knew everybody, of course, but he knew Serena's and them's father's agent, and he had that guy on a few times. The guy wrote a book about broke athletes. He got that guy on, and then we asked Zach to go out to the tennis match to see if he could get anybody to talk to us on the show, since he, liked to talk to strangers. And so he goes out to the Queens to the tennis match, and he gets all these people, all these people, kind of like pretty somewhat famous people to come on the radio show. And of course, we said, Zach, what are you getting those guys for? Go find us somebody black. So he went and he found a black dude who was selling hot dogs. Was a hot dog vendor. So we interviewed him, as you recall. We said, let's interview him. We interviewed the black hot dog guys, a lot of white people out there. Yeah. What they're getting on their hot dogs, real important questions, making him went, whoa. Then he went and found a black parking guy. And then the guy gets on there, and the guy's parked the cars. Who came there famous? Mary J. Blige, come in, what kind of car? She got a real nice car. I think he said that Bentley. Then, of course, we said, all right, we know you looked in the ashtray. What was in there? The dude paused for a minute, started laughing. He said, come on, you can tell us. So Zach was the kind of on-the-scene guy that you could just get and go anywhere, because he had that voice, unassuming voice, and that Delaware, that Wilmington, Delaware twang.
And I think he sincerely liked people.
He did.
He sincerely liked people.
I never understood that talking to strangers shit, man. That shit.
Well, that was one of the
man.
things I found out from working with so many NYCHA residents, how nice they were.
They are. They still are. They still are.
They were just.
Really
we were
nice.
welcomed everywhere we went.
Yes, that's true.
And in the summertime, I know Zach took me and others around to several NYCHA developments. And wherever we went, the community groups or those who were running NYCHA programs down in the basement of NYCHA developments were always so receptive to us. We always got a very warm welcome. And a lot of that was due to Zach Cornell Husser.
Well, the funny thing is, if you were to profile the personality of a 25-year community worker, if you went to Wikipedia, it would be him.
Right.
He had the personality, he had the intelligence, he was not a mean person, but he was just ornery enough that if you didn't like his information, he would not care. You're getting it anyway.
One of the last things I heard from Zach was, Heyward, don't you talk to me like that ever again. And
well, he meant that. He meant that. That's why he slipped up and died on you, man.
He doesn't say things he didn't mean.
Let me tell you what Wally said about one of our friends. He said, I mentioned to Wally that Zach died, and the first thing Wally said was, oh, he's not supposed to do that.
Nobody ever thought about him passing. Nobody.
I told Stu that. When Stu called me, I said, Stu, you don't think of a guy like him dying.
Right.
He was one of those.
Well,
he was one of them.
He's not dead because the
crowd. Of course not. We're still talking about it.
In that theater.
I would say this. There was a great thing on Netflix about Jack Johnson, and what an incredible human being he was. And the guy Stanley Couch said something about Jack Johnson that I think applies to Zach. And he said, it was something about Jack Johnson. He looked at the camera, he said, oh yeah, he's one of them. And then you heard the guy back going, one of them, what he said, if he wasn't a real person, you'd have to make him up. And I would think that would be Zach Cornelius Husser. If he wasn't a real person, you'd make him up, because no one is that funny.
That's right. Well, and also, just determined to spread the word. Whatever the word is, he was determined to spread the word. And we're fortunate that he always was, as I said earlier, was a race man. So that the word he was spreading usually was a benefit to Africans, American Africans and others.
Well, if he was like the younger people, they would call him a hype man. The younger people, but he had a lot of substance. He wasn't just hype. He hyped, what he was about, and he had a little substance to him. But you're right. I like determined because that to me it's what I liked about him. Yeah, he was determined and unswayed by any kind of comedy. Well, we could piss him off after a while, but it took a lot. It took a lot to get him to where we pissed him off, but we worked on it. We worked on it. It took like 5 years.
Some of us worked on it.
Well, unwittingly, you didn't. You worked on it. Like one time, him, Zach, and Michael George was having an argument, and me and Heyward were in the studio. So, since you're an engineer, so you understand that. I was able to turn down our headphones, my headphones. I mean, Heyward's headphones, so that we could hear him. We could hear Michael George and what's his name arguing, but they couldn't hear what me and Heyward was saying. And then I was talking like to the third wall to the people in the audience while they were arguing in the background. So I was, but they was going at it like this. And I'm talking, and Heyward is like going, then he turned around and looked at me and go, "What are you doing that?" And I was calling myself explaining to the audience why they were arguing. Because you wasn't going to be able to hear it because they was just like going at it. I said, well, they're arguing, blah, blah, blah. Then I said, okay, we're gonna get back to our program and enjoying the argument in progress. And when I panned it up, they were still arguing. And so Heyward got upset because he thought that they couldn't hear, Michael Jordan couldn't hear what we were saying. And they couldn't. Only him and I could hear that. But since he was one of the few enumerated participants in the station, he just kept quiet. I think he acted like someone who was getting paid still, and he just zipped it. I thought that was interesting on your part.
Well, also, Zach was my best man at my wedding.
Okay.
Zach was my teammate on the Columbia University basketball team, and he was also my teammate on the Columbia baseball team. So
wow.
His ties to me and his calling on me was much more profound than anyone else.
Well, most people don't know that he was a all-state football player, in Delaware. You heard how smart he was because he got in Columbia and all that. But he was a real athlete, and of course, having competed against him a few times, they would, send him out there to, whip up. He was like a hatchet man. Because he's a football player. They would send him out there to beat up on.
And he was very committed to working with the Pelham Fritz.
Oh, he was the commissioner.
League in Harlem. And he did a fine job for 5 years there.
He was that was a great. He did a great. In fact, that was one of the ways that we got on the radio was because the idea came about of trying to get the Pelham Fritz games on the radio.
Right.
And, he was instrumental in finding the person, as he usually is, what a wonderful scout he was, of finding the person who we had to talk to or whatever, and that's how we wound up at the college, him, myself, and Rolando. We did the little, Joe came up and he interviewed us and blah, 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 and said, hey, we need a good sports show, and he asked us to come on and
That'd be Joe Brown.
That would be Joe Brown, who was the general manager and stuff. And the show,
a wonderful man, I might add, a wonderful, dedicated community guy who wanted to bring the very best of radio to the Harlem community. And at that time, that was very difficult to do. Not many people had that vision, but Joe had it. And surprisingly, he invested his confidence in you, Doug.
Well, I thought that was really
But
goofy.
he also had enough sense to bring Michael George and myself onto the show. So kudos, Joe, wherever you are.
Well, I thought it was interesting to show you how you were right about me, is that when Joe first talked about doing a radio show, I said to him, I'm not doing that. And Zach looked at me like something was wrong with me, and I immediately ignored Zach. I ain't doing that. I don't want to be on that stupid crap. and which might account for why I was on for so long and never said my name. But
Would you repeat that one more time?
which could be part of the reason why I was on there for
And?
so long and never said my real name. But there was more to it than just that. Because I grew up on radio, I thought you had to have your own little radio name. And I didn't have a radio name, so I called myself the Button Pusher, which of course annoyed him to no end. But when I told one of my college teammates, I said, yeah, man, I was over there, because they asked me about basketball. I said, yeah, man, I was over to the radio station and they asked us to do a show. So the guy said, and I'll never forget him, he said, yo, you're an idiot. And I said, really? And what else to do? He said, no, more people could hear you on that radio station probably could hear what Malcolm X was talking about. He said, why would you say no to that? And then I realized I was just being immature.
That's right.
About the whole thing. So I went back to Joe and said, we ought to try it out, see if we could really, do the thing. But we had to have other people, blah, blah, blah. So.
And now you're involved with a radio broadcast system that has at least 15 locations in various
pretty
development,
yeah. And
other places. Other places.
Yeah, it's pretty innovative. Well,
he put you on the right track.
Actually, I didn't know that, but after like you said, after maybe a couple of years, I'll tell you the one thing that there was two incidents that really flipped me the whole other way. One, of course, after Joe left, the new general manager was, as soon as she got a load of the stuff that I was doing, she was apoplectic. He said, and I remember her coming to me and said, well, who taught you how to do that? I said, I taught myself.
And I still remember her gesture of moving her finger
across her neck, yeah. Well, the funny part was we got, so eventually I guess she was on her, she said, I got to get rid of this guy. And so I remember one time she suspended me, and called me up and said, you're suspended. And silence. And then she said, do you want to know why you were suspended? More silence. She said, Doug. I said, oh, okay, all right. She said, well, you didn't do so-and-so. I said, okay, good. Let me know when I can come back. And I hung up. This is how interested I was in it, because I kept thinking, immaturely, I'm sure, that this was a hobby. And that when you're doing a hobby, you do it because it's fun. And if somebody gives you a whole lot of instructions, it's not a hobby no more. This is what I was thinking. Now, I'm not saying I was right or wrong, but that was my attitude. Mm-hmm. And I was going, if you want to tell me what to do, how about give me a couple of bucks? Then I'll do everything you say. But if you're not giving me any money and you giving me all these rules and all this other stuff, I'm thinking, I ain't going to be here. I'm not one for this. Mm-hmm. So that was one thing that made me realize that she wouldn't be tolerating you and letting you be on there if we hadn't had a real show. Just that I refused to conform to whatever she was talking about. Just wasn't willing to do that.
And by doing so, it just pointed out how tolerant and how obvious Joe was.
Yeah, he was.
His vision for the radio.
Yes, he was. Because I remember he kept coming to us and going, okay, we got to talk about more issues. Because we were talking about sports continuously. He goes, no, talk about more issues. So by the time the new general manager came in, we was into some serious issues because we didn't care about any time. We would tackle almost any kind of subject, and we didn't care.
That's right.
And so, and we'd hit it from all kinds of ways. And plus, with you and Michael George on there, you had two people who were very opinionated, who were from New York, who were grown up in New York, who had, slept on the subway just like all the rest of us, knew what it was all about, knew what New York was all about, and had been sports thing and on a high level. So all of a sudden, you had some real intellectual stuff, and how we sold the thing was that we kept saying that when you get in the locker room, there's no dishonesty in the locker room. And that was, and most people don't know that.
That was the beauty of sports back then. I'm not so sure that stayed.
I think that's still true. I still think it's true.
Because you see guys coming into the locker room all decked out in their finest.
That's only because they got cash. So you got bread. So once you remove the bread part, because once you out there playing, the bread don't matter. It's all about the game. So I thought that the transfer of the honesty, and I think about David Robinson, and I remember we were sitting there, and David Robinson was playing against the Houston Rockets when David Robinson won the MVP, and they went up against Houston. I remember we did the show, and we were critiquing David Robinson, and he was going like, "Yo, man, he was afraid out there." And it was coming, and we was there laughing, going, "Yeah, it was coming, it was leaking through my TV." See how afraid, you know what I mean? How afraid he was. And then we started talking about how when you're in sports, being afraid actually doesn't help you. It just means that you're not crazy, but it doesn't help you because there's still going to be Kareem Abdul-Jabbar over there. Whether you're afraid of him or not, he's not going to magically disappear. This guy's going to be there. And we were thinking, I just could think how we had all got in there, and we had all started going in on David Robinson for being afraid, and it came across realizing that as an athlete, being afraid is just something that's there, but you still have to get out and you have to compete. And you have to try to do your best to help. Like, as Bobby Hunter used to say, we expect everybody to help us win the fucking game if you show up.
That's right.
We expect you to do everything you can to help us, whatever it is. You know what I mean? Because you're here. Mm-hmm. Not because, because I'll never forget.
And I think, Doug, that was one of the reasons why some coach that you had sat you down on the bench and let you get up only when he needed shots, one right after the other.
Well, I didn't mind because, it was basketball.
Oh,
I didn't mind.
But
and it was the circumstance.
It was the same for.
And it was the coach was really smart because I remember that particular game, and the coach sat down the two starters, and I was one of them, and I remember sitting on the bench, and the other starter started whining. "Oh man, Doug, you see this, blah, blah, blah." And I remember, and I looked at him, I said, "I'm going to get up from here, and I'm going to go sit down on the other end of the bench." And he said, "Why, man? You see what the coach is doing?" I said, "The other guys on the team have been watching me and you play for 2 years, man. They come here every game, they watch me and you start, get all the minutes. Even though I don't like it, I'm not going to let them see that I'm all salty, because now I got to watch them. So I ain't going to sit next to you. I'm going to go sit down there, because you salty and you ain't going to get, and you're not going to get over it right now." Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But so when the coach did it, I didn't, I was like, so what? But at the same time, I knew that, the assignment, the determined assignment was going to be what the assignment is, so you're going to, and one of the things that I did like about playing what I was going to say, the part I missed was John Isaacs. This is the part I was going to say. John Isaacs, when we went around the room and said, "Man, what do we think about Dave Robinson?" And I remember John Isaacs saying, "He's a punk." And I remember people calling in, they was going like, "How could you say that?" And I remember telling them, I'll never forget, it's going like, "Yo, one thing about sports, it'll test you down to the depths of your soul." "No, what were you talking about?" I said, "You're going to find out what kind of a man you are. Because you're going to be competing against other people, and there's no lying. There's no, oh, I didn't do that. No, oh, you don't, there's no explaining nothing, there's no explaining nothing there. It's like almost intolerant. The psychology of the sports thing. You get in because people say, the more you explain, the more people will fuck with you. And you hang out with these people every day, practice, traveling, and they're unmerciful. The unmercifulness of trying to explain away the obvious. So you have to let the obvious happen and try to figure out how to not let that mistake happen again. So it forces you to be better.
That's right. That's right.
And I kept thinking, and what I learned was, gee, they should teach a lot of people. Everybody should be taught the lessons of teammanship, of what happens when you work with other people and what you have to do, and how the whole thing is about being honest.
Yes.
And I think that was the thing about the show that was kind of endearing, because at the end, because like even with the intro, we would try to, like I was saying, we try to come in while we were still talking. So it's like you just came in and happened to hear us in the locker room shooting the shit, and boom. Because in the locker room, people, again, you got a lot of highly skilled, specifically highly skilled person, not highly skilled in intellectualness or whatever, but you got people who are highly skilled in one or two things, And so you can't get there without a whole lot of other things. And so when you get in there and now you're going against other people who are like that, the truth is unbearable. The truth is bearable.
But that's still why athletes are special.
Right.
Even to this day and age,
Maybe you're right.
athletes are special. In a world of entertainers, they're special. In a world of intellectuals, they're special. In the world of philosophy, they're special.
Because all that's going on.
That's right.
The philosophy, the entertainment, when you're playing the philosophy.
And I throw out one example, LeBron James, who I think embodies all of that, in part because of President Trump, in part because of the demands of the Laker and Cleveland and Heat communities, but also because he's 6'8" and intelligent. And he has to kind of be 6'8" and intelligent about so many things.
I remember, because when we did the show, he was in high school. And I remember we had this big conversation around him because somebody called in and said, LeBron James is, because his mother had brought him not a Range Rover, a Hummer. He had a Hummer in high school. Senior year in high school, he has a Hummer. So the guy calls up on the show, we in there one day, the guy says, oh, the guy got a Hummer, and how can a high school kid got a Hummer, blah, 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 blah. And he should be going to college. So there's a big debate about whether he should go to college or the NBA. And I remember while we were having that debate, I remember all of us coming to the conclusion that, well, because we all have been athletes, we all just say, wait a minute. If you have a 6'8" person, kid, sleeping in your house right now, whose feet's hanging over the bed, and somebody's going to make him a millionaire, and you're talking about him going to college, we're going to get Zach's African soup bowl, beat the crap out. You know what I mean? Regular people go to college to do that. When you're 6'8" and the NBA calls you, there's nothing to talk about. You show up. Mm-hmm. And the thing about, and people didn't, and there were people who called in and who argued with us, who actually tried to make the case that he should be going to college.
And now the situation is, as soon as you get out of high school, you have your choice of going into the pros, going to college.
Well, he had that. Remember, he had that, and then they tried to cut it off.
But now it's for everybody.
Now it's back.
It's filtered down to everybody, thanks to Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and some others.
Well, you know, he was one of the, now this is maybe like 3 or 4, every now and then you get a guy, and he was one of them, who will show up and be the real deal. Will Chamberlain, Elgin Baylor, Bill Russell, LeBron James.
That's right.
And I wouldn't put Michael Jordan in there because nobody didn't think, they thought he was good, but nobody didn't think he was who he wound up to be. They thought he was good, and we all know that. Everybody thought he was going to be a good player. That's why he drafted number 3. But nobody thought he was going to be the killer that he turned out to be. Will Chamberlain, they knew he was going to be a killer. Bill Russell, they knew who he was.
Lou Alcindor. Or
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. They knew who he was. That's right. That's right. That's right. No, you're right. He was another one. He delivered. But see, he doesn't even. I don't count him because he was on one of the greatest college teams in the history of college sports. Right. I think they lost like one game in 3 years or 4 years. The greatest.
And also, he did something that only Chamberlain had done. Made them alter the rules of the basketball game.
Yes, he did. No dunking.
When they outlawed dunking because of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So LeBron, you would put LeBron James up there with those cats who actually was as good as advertised. And the only other guy that I say who was good from the first day, but he wasn't advertised like that, would have to be Isaiah Thomas. And the reason why I say that, even though he was an NCAA, champion, he left college after junior. He left out high. But if you go back and look at the records, every guard that was on the championship NCAA team gets drafted. So he did not do the unexpected. But when you look at his stat line of his first game, you can see he had 31 points, 12 rebounds, and 9 rebounds and 11 assists. First game out the boat. And he never stopped playing that well.
Right.
Yeah, he never stopped playing. He was really a diamond. So LeBron is with these guys. Guy shows up and delivers right off the top. I thought that was. I thought that was. Oh shit, we are. Yeah, you're listening to Mr. Stu Reed, who's on camera. Oh shit. They didn't hear that part. Every time it plays the bumper, you have to go back in the mic. Okay, so we're here at the Riverside Studio with the voice of clarity, Miss Dr. Professor Heyward Dotson, the, as I used to say, the rogue scholar. I say that every week. And of course, my man, Mr. Stu A. Reed. The A stands for always. And of course, my name is Mr. Frazier. I'm the button pushing. We're here talking and reminiscing a little bit about the Cornell C. Hustler, and the C stands for, what does C stand for?
Zach C. Hustler.
What does C stand for?
Cornell.
Oh.
That college up in Ithaca, New York.
I thought it stood for comedy because that's what one of my main reasons for hanging out with him. I'll never forget, me and you and him went to the Theater Museum of Harlem, that building. And we went in because somebody had invited, I think Fulani had invited us over there. And we went there, and Zach was under the impression that we were being invited there to speak. So we used to have on our show a lot. So all three of us sojourn over to there, and we get to the building, and Zach looks around, and he said, "I'm going to go down there to see if they have our names on the DS."
I remember
that.
I remember.
And he went down there, and he came back. He said, "They don't have our names." And he was like really annoyed. So I said, "Let's go." Mm-hmm. So we left. And I remember you saying, look at me, I was going, why is Zach acting like that? And you said, because he's normal. Because he's normal. And one time I made this comment to Stu, which I think wasn't true. I tried to tell Stu that Zach was a normal person, and as we talked, it wasn't true. Mm-hmm. As we talked, it was not true.
You said it more than once, and I disagreed vehemently every time.
Yeah, you did, and you were right. And you were right. There was nothing.
He was extraordinary.
Yes, he was.
Well, we were very fortunate to come along in the period when we did. A lot was happening in a lot of different worlds: sports, music, movies, all of that kind of stuff. Civil rights. We were very, very fortunate, because not only did we survive that period, but I think we learned from it so that we've passed it on to other generations. And I take a look at my own family, my daughter and her 4 grandkids, and I can see that much of what we were saying in the 70s and 80s was listened to and absorbed, and now is profitable to people.
Well, I look at the NBA, the show where they got a show on NBA TV where all of those older athletes come and sit down, and they do exactly what we did. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was quite a tribute. I look at this thing on cable. There's a channel called Revolt, which is run by Puffy, and they have a show in there called Morning Show. This is the exact same thing that we do right now at WHCR. Exact same format, everything. Mm-hmm. So you're right. We were kind of ahead of the curve. We was trying to do video even then.
That's right.
We was doing it even then, jacking around stuff. So we were, and the format of the show and the kind of back and forth stuff that we were able to get to talk about, particularly that I forgot the big lady was a lawyer. When we argued about the thing about the police living in the community, and I thought that was like such a stupid joke. Who cares where the cop live at? Mm-hmm. I just thought it didn't make any sense to me personally. Like I don't care where you live at. You know?
And to prove your point, here it is 20 years or 15 years later, and nobody even brings up that.
Yeah, I thought it was ludicrous. And I remember we used to tell people.
And the police are still living in the suburbs
whenever
they get the chance.
And I remember, thanks to all of us, we would always tell people that that voting wasn't a team sport, and that they should shop for democracy. They should take their vote and shop around and vote for somebody even if it's Bobo the Clown. But don't tie yourself, because I thought personally that the Democratic Party was disingenuous and has been disingenuous, so the two-party system has been disingenuous to everyone.
I particularly felt your sting being a member of the Democratic Party and a candidate for office on a couple of occasions
Segway boys
here in Harlem. So I took your stinging criticism to heart, perhaps a little bit more than others. But when you look at 2018, we see with the advent the advent of the Obama presidency and now the Trump presidency that our admonition to take politics seriously back then was the correct one, because I think our people are much better fortified now, as are the nicer residents, I might add, against a mayor who may be a little bit delinquent and tardy in seeing to their needs and his responsibility to their needs under the law.
What an understatement.
I think we
You
were
said
very,
a
very
little
fortunate.
delinquent, and look, I think that might be a slight understatement of what they're going on. 'Cause I just saw that.
I think a recent judge ruling would agree with you.
Yeah, 'cause I just saw that the judge just said that what they was talking about as a settlement was ludicrous, and he threw it out. He said you can't enforce it. Coming in front of me with an agreement that all of you guys, as Malcolm.
We now are in the situation where the leaders of this city, as well as the African and Hispanic communities, African American and Hispanic communities, must decide what is going to be the status of public housing in their midst. You simply cannot continue to build 50, 60-story towers and leave people with paint peeling, rats running around, or inadequate public spaces within their shelters. You cannot do a lot of those things because it's damaging to the city as a whole, and particularly to African Americans who are trying to hold on to their spots, who are aging, and who generally need to have the public leaders work for them, as Dr. King said they should, as Malcolm X said they should, as Zach Husser said they should. And this is happening slowly but surely. And when you look at how de Blasio and the courts are reacting to the current housing situation, or the current public housing situation, you can see that slowly but surely a day of reckoning is coming. And it's going to be where we find the appropriate place with the appropriate amenities, with the appropriate securities for tenancy for nicer residents.
Well, I love your optimism, and I think it's beautiful, and I love the intellectualizing of it. But I think that that the people are going to have to get a lot smarter about what it is that they should ask for or demand, and what should be done. Because when you look at that NYCHA is the poster child for income inequality.
Yes.
There's just no other way around it. And they're as one of Stu's in-laws would say, they're going all around the horse's ass and not dealing with the real deal. It's about the income inequality. And they won't.
There's another difference now as opposed to 20 years ago, Doug, in that many American Africans have spent 30, 40 years in the housing. So they have rights that they never had before. And they're politically smarter. They've sent some of their kids to college. They have lawyers now floating around everywhere. So they're going to be in a much better position.
Good.
Because they can always go to the courts now and get a type of justice they could never get before.
That's true. And you know what? That's one of the things that I would have to say, one of the biggest takeaways that I got from palling around with you can be beneficial to you by using it the right way, if you have the right kinds and what rights you have. And I'm saying that the same thing that you use should be used for income inequality. And what they have to really do is, you can't have some big, tall, dopey white guy talking about income inequality. You have to have some advocate for it. You have to have some community advocate that understands. Because if you talk to people about it right now, they'll say, they're so doctrinized, they'll say crazy things like, well, what kind of services should I be providing to get some of the money? Mm-hmm. You know, they're thinking about working. Mm-hmm. They're not thinking about, well, how do we get some money and go out and fund people's in the community's ideas?
Well,
they're not thinking that.
Whether you're talking about the Trump constituency whether you're talking about the social service constituency, single mothers with children, the elderly, whether you're talking about regular police officers and other public servants who want to live in the city, things will be done now, because all of those people, all of those groups want to stay in their city, in their apartments.
Still, okay, all I'm saying is that I'm down with that because I understand how more now about the family court than I ever did. All I'm saying is that when you have something that has all of those piles of cash, and you have, like you said, they're building helipads for Jeff Bezos, they're building all these tall towers that we all see around the city, and the people with no income.
Well, you put it clearly about 3 years ago when you said the main problem is income.
Correct.
Do you mean jobs?
No.
Do you mean education?
Income.
Nope. People just need income. Whether you're an immigrant, whether you're a welfare mother, whether you're a senior citizen, or a young person right out of college with $80,000 in educational debt, you need income. And until leaders start talking only about the need for income,
nothing's going to get done.
That's right.
Because they're just sitting around talking stupid crap. Oh, you need a job. We got to get more jobs. Look, Amazon.
There'll never be enough jobs.
Thank you. Amazon is putting 25,000 jobs in Long Island City. I bet you there's 25,000 people unemployed in Queensbridge houses.
That's right.
By itself. By itself.
That's right. That's right.
By itself. And we all know that is true. And so when they come up and they say these little stupid things like jobs we're going to get it. You could have took the $1 billion that they're giving them for $20 and put it in the community. And some white guy got up there and said that. They were standing in front of the place. They were only, to me, it looked like they were yelling because they were probably who got bypassed in the process. But one of the things that the guy did say was, well, if you're giving them $2 billion, you could have taken that $2 billion and invested in Queensbridge houses. How come you got that? They have the money. What the problem is that you have people who have all of these ideas about working with them.
Right.
Every time you come, they don't think out of the box. They don't think that, we got to do something different. Just like now, you can pretty see, you can look at the system that the system that we have, the political system, and see if this is what you're getting, something ain't right. It ain't working so good. If you have a capitalistic system and you got a whole bunch of people who have nothing, something ain't right, particularly when you think it's a good idea to make them work to go to the doctor. They've lost it. And that's what you have in 4 states. People who are so busy wanting to believe that somebody's getting something for doing nothing that they can't see past that. Somebody's getting something and they haven't done anything to earn it. They're getting, and they're missing it.
But it's also
sad, man.
It's also clear too now that after the last 6 or 7 years, we've come as a group and as a people to understand that real estate developers should not be the only ones who can talk effectively about income. And that is going by the boards too. Real estate developers, commercial developers talking about income, taking public property, taking private property to produce income. Well, if it's good enough for them, it's certainly good for the other 99.2% of us.
You left out because you left out one piece. They don't say that they're doing income. They say they're doing it for jobs, and that's the benefit that they were providing. And people are drinking their Kool-Aid, thinking that a job. No, and I always use the NBA analogy. Whenever I get a chance to talk to somebody about it, I always go use the NBA analogy. You could be a great basketball player, but the NBA invites you. You don't get the income because you're a good player. You get the income because you're a good player and you're invited into the game.
That's right.
That's how it works. And so if you have a political system and somebody says... I
still have my letters from the NBA basketball commissioner from 1973 where he says the NBA will be glad to welcome you into professional basketball.
You didn't call them. They called you. Mm-hmm. And what people have to understand is that, like you said, there's no jobs. And the one place where there's an opportunity for innovation is in the public sector. And that's the one place where they don't have innovation. They think that the private companies are going to be innovative. Private companies are not going to be innovative. They're there to make money. When we were doing the venture capital stuff, we go around talking. They want to know how you going to get us out of this deal.
That's right.
Yep.
They wasn't asking us about none of that other crap. They want to know how you're going to make some money. The city doesn't have to do that.
That's right.
But they line people up, and people start believing the bullshit.
Well, I think we're not believing the developers anymore.
They shouldn't believe the politicians no more, is what I say.
Well, I think that is happening too.
That's what I say. I think you need to tell them.
The courts that are kind of leading the way for the people not to believe the politicians.
My point is that because the point is that you need to be telling them what it is you want. I just give you an example. So when Stu and I was going around, raising money for our little stupid stuff, we gotta get a lawyer. And I would always sit there with Stu going, well, we don't need no lawyer. That if you think we gonna go to a lawyer and I'm gonna listen to the lawyer talking to the wrong guy, we gonna talk to the lawyer and we want the lawyer to tell us how he's gonna help us do what we want to do. Because, people get it all wrong. We got to figure out how the city to give it the court. We got to figure out how. No, the people who are giving out the money, it's not their money. It belongs to the people. Why aren't you asking to get some of the money for our group? And let us go screw it up. Mm-hmm. I mean, nobody's going to lock you up for saying that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have no problem with the word nor the concept. You're
a marauder. I know that. You're an All-American and an NBA guy. You have a...
No, it was Dotson for the district, if I remember. And one of the reasons I ran for public office was because I wanted to bring that type of tangibility to the ordinary Harlem resident in particular, but New York resident in general.
And here I was thinking that you were doing it so that you can pilferage and get everything that you can get your grubby paws on, and for you and your friends. And now I feel cheated that I contributed to your campaign, because now you tell me you're going to be an honest guy.
Well,
I'm so upset.
At that time, I passed for honest, and now I would pass for even more honest.
You sure would.
So I urge everybody just to take a look at where the income is coming from, not only for you, but for your children. And remember, in a lot of European countries, they already provide income in the form of free education, or free health care, or free housing. They provide, quote, income for the ordinary citizen of that nation.
I'm just saying, you have 4 states, and I just read Arkansas has thrown 12,000 people off of the Affordable Care Act because they didn't have a job. Mm-hmm. So whenever you start getting to a country or to a culture where people start thinking that you're not even worthy of going to the doctor, you're asking for somebody to take an ice pick and stick it in your eyeball. Well, theoretically, I'm talking about intellectually. I don't mean physically. I mean intellectually.
That's why some of us are cheered, if only slightly, by the recent election of the new Congress, which we think includes many, many more members who would have that type of group, everybody included, thinking when they come up with their legislative policies. Couldn't have happened under the Trump administration.
Could not.
Obama, being the first American African president, could not put it on the line. His big thing was to survive not being assassinated.
But I think what most people have not given, and I told this to one of my friends, that the Democratic Party did not take the proper credit. They were the ones who fell on their swords for health care.
Yes.
They didn't go crony. They said, we need health care, everybody need it, I'm going to lose my job for it.
Well, you've heard me say several...
And they fell on their sword.
You heard me say
you didn't hear anything about that.
Several times that...
That's bravery, Stu. That's doing the people's work right there.
You've heard me say several times that Obama's health program will be the major U.S. achievement
You did say that.
of the 21st century.
And you were right. And Republicans lost because of it. And in fact, I remember having me and Stu going to a meeting with a guy, and I remember telling the guy, I said, this was early on when Donald got in. I remember telling the guy, big shot. And I told him, I said, look, the reason why I'm telling you this because you're a big shot and you could go down and they might listen to you. It's true story, man. Still back me up now. Tell me, stop me when I lie still.
Carry on.
Don't let the fact that everybody's throwing up their hands.
He got a camera later.
You know,
No, he was sitting right there, so he's gonna correct me if I mistake some of this. And I said to the big shot, I said, listen, if Donald Trump gave everybody their free health care, he can get up there and lie all he wants. Nobody would care.
That's right.
Did I say that, Stu? And I think that everybody and no one disbelieves that. Nobody would care.
Well, he didn't do that, and now we have a Congress
that says okay.
Where the ordinary American, non-American African or American Latino or immigrant has decided that they're going to try and run things for a while. And it's all because of what Donald Trump did, trying to spit in their face and call it rain.
He did this. There was a thing on TV, on the internet, just saw it yesterday. They counted the number of falsehood and lies that he did over the last week. The day before the election, he lied. The day before the election, they said that in the last 3 months, he lied. He had 1,800 and something falsehoods, and he only had 1,200 falsehoods all of last year. In 3 months leading up to the election, he lied more than he did. In fact, they counted his lies. They said he lied 75 times the day before the election. That was his highest total of lies. Just was throwing all kinds of lies out there.
Well, I'll have to give you props, Doug, because to my knowledge, you were one of the first people right after President Trump was elected and who heard his comment, and your comment was, he's a liar.
That was an easy call. That was an easy call.
And
you
about
can't take no credit for that.
4 weeks later, all of the newscasts and the journalists starting using that as a term for President Trump.
That was an easy call to make. I ain't taking no credit for that. That was an easy call to make. It was so obvious. There was no reason to look beyond it. You know what I mean? But
many of us wanted to give, quote, the President of the United States a break.
Well, I'll go back to our sports analogy. You know, you're not going to have a guy who can't dribble with his left hand start dribbling with his left hand because we all sitting there going, don't worry, he's going to be able to dribble with his left hand next week. Not going to happen.
Right.
And so that was what they were saying about him. They were saying like, oh, don't worry, he's going to be presidential next week. No, he's not. He is who we think he is, just like in sports. If the guy goes right all the time, he's going right.
But also as a consequence of what Urban Communications and your company has been doing over the past 25 years, we now have more people plugged in to what he's saying.
Correct.
And we had a lot of women this past 3 months who heard, listened, and decided to act. And now we have we have over 125 women in Congress, in the House of Representatives. Absolutely extraordinary.
Well, no, I would say the extraordinary thing was him. Señor Naranja, which means Mr. Orange in Spanish. But to me, the extraordinary thing was him, and him getting in, and their acquiescence, and as a word I learned from Stu, and their duplicit manner in which they acted with him. And they decided not to do the people's work.
Tried to act with him because he's gotten caught at the 2-year point.
Well, he was caught from the beginning in my book, but because of the system.
He's gotten caught legally, electorally.
Okay, you're a lawyer. Let's get to this. How in the wide world of sports is it that he could put an acting baby man in there? No, he got rid of the baby man. You know the guy. Who's the baby man?
Jeff Sessions.
He got rid of the baby man, and now he got an acting baby man who looks like a skinhead, and he goes right over top of the deputy. How does that happen?
That's the way the system, we like to talk about the system, that's the way the system is set up. And it's going to be changed.
It's not set up like that, though.
It's going to be changed, I assure you, by the next Congress.
But it's not set up like that because that was a trick question. Because I actually listened to these 3 or 4 law professors who came on TV and tried to answer that question and broke down the... 2 of them went to the Constitution on him, man. Mm-hmm. I said, whoa! They went to the Constitution and said that Trump was violating the Constitution, but not faithfully upholding the law, because they're saying that they found 2 statues, and the guy said the Justice Department lawyers should be ashamed.
Well, faith is in the eye of every atheist. So, you know.
I'm just saying, think about that. No, I'm saying, think about the
we
optics.
had not gotten to the spirit of the Constitution then. Now we are. And the spirit in the next year or two will be interpreted by a basically female Congress. They'll decide what the spirit of democracy, what the spirit of America really is, particularly going into the presidential elections of 2020.
Well, here's what I am. Here's what I'm hoping for, and I don't care if it's wrong. I'm hoping for. I'm hoping for some womanly revenge. That's what I'm hoping for. Because if there was anybody or any group of people...
He talked about like dogs, treated like dogs.
If there's any group of people who have begged and deserved that, is the ongoing discussion over the EHCR.online network. Those of you who missed this live thing, the show will be available on our YouTube channel sometime in tomorrow or the next day, depending upon when our senior technical producer, Mr. Stu Reed, posted it to be available for those of you who want to partake of it. And don't forget,
well, I will
Wisdom Table.
I will say
Tuesdays.
that I'm glad to see there's been a significant upgrade in the producer's chair since our show, Issues in Sports. I feel a lot more confident going forward now than I've ever felt.
I thought this was a tribute to Zach, because Zach was the producer.
Well, it is kind of a tribute to Zach.
But he was the producer for the other show, did you know
No,
that?
he wasn't. He called himself that in name, but in fact, I believe you were the producer.
The guy with no name?
Stu,
The guy with no name?
thank you for the upgrade.
Oh, you're
Thank
welcome.
you for the upgrade.
My
The
pleasure.
guy with no name was the producer. I doubt that very seriously. I doubt that very seriously. But I thought that we, just like today, see how we just delved into the notion of the the things that they're doing right in people's face, and people have no idea that, when the city says, and just going to jump right back, when the city says stupid things like, oh, we're going to spend $3 billion fixing something up, and then nobody, just like I railed in back then, they spent $3 billion for one subway station, all cash, the one across the street from Javits Center. Nobody, So, and then, to fix a place that's the size, got more people than the state of Vermont Housing Authority, and because they're not white, I'm assuming, they decide that, we're not going to take care of it. Not only are we going to not take care of it, we're going to have some Byzantine architecture that we make up. And we're just going to exclude the people.
Well, Doug,
It's unbelievable.
never forget that as of about 4 years ago, the majority of the registered voters in New York City are American Africans and American Hispanics. So, at the ballot box, in the next few years, I think we're going to see some radical changes coming to the municipal administration.
Well, I think I'm just going to make a suggestion when it comes to the municipal system and the municipal spend. I would recommend that all the voters go watch Putney Swope. And pay very close attention to the part where he says there's only going to be some small changes around here. That's the kind of small changes we need. And if anybody's seen Iron Man or Sherlock Holmes, Robert, the guy who plays all that, his father made Putney Swope. That was his dad.
Oh, okay.
Really?
Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
Did not know that, huh?
I didn't know that.
That's right. His dad was
Downey. I remember that name.
Robert
Now
Downey
you say that.
His dad
Yeah.
was a famous director, and he directed Putney Swope.
Well, I have hope because of the election of the new Attorney General, Miss Letitia James.
The state.
Yes, but I think eventually she's going to be mayor of New York City, the first female mayor of New York City. And I think she is, in the spirit of those women who went to Congress and the rest this year, she's going to be able to impact this city fairly quickly in the next 4 or 5 years.
Boy, you can see me and Stu's enthusiasm. You can tell how enthusiastic we are about this thing.
You're both de
Trump,
Blasio supporters.
No, we're not. No, we're not. I wouldn't say
that.
I wouldn't say that.
You to be in favor.
I wouldn't say that. I would say that if you look at what we have done, I would think you would say that it has been our experience that think about one of the letters that we wrote to the city, and one of the last lines we wrote in it was, "White guys win all the time." And I would think that is the culture of the municipal spend, is white guys win all the time.
Yes, it's
now, I have no idea. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm Nostradamus. I have no idea why that is. But I think there's an amazing algorithm that allows 26 mayoral agencies to somehow come up with an algorithm where they spend 95% of the people's money on one group of people of the same race and the same gender. I wonder what kind of algorithm that they're using to come up with those kind of statistics, too. Particularly now that we're into the data gapping. And of course, some of us who are psychologically trained from university had to endure statistical courses because they didn't have, you had to figure out your own analytics in terms of people's behavior and measurement. Now that only gave you a basis, but at least it gave you a baseline for the kind of analytic stuff that you had available today, or to think analytically. And when you start thinking analytically, you start looking around and saying, wait a minute, something is not correct, about this, and it's all part of it. And I don't care how many, if you're a Democrat or a Republican, when you have the kind of money that this city spends every year, and you could figure out how not to give one group of people some of it, that's pretty good. It's pretty smart. And people should demand that, we don't care. We want our cut. We want ours. We'll take ours, we'll go over here, don't ask us shit. When we fuck it up, we'll come back for some more, just like y'all do. Instead of sitting around going, well, let's go see what we could get a contract from them. It's not their money. I keep saying that. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna go over there and spend Stu's money. Stu's not gonna spend my money. That's my money. You know what I'm saying? He's not gonna do that. And I've known Stu since we were dirt. I'm not gonna spend Stu's money.
And since
I'm just saying. Am I right, Stu? Did I making that point, Stu?
You never really spent more than $5 a week for any person involved with your radio.
Well, I'm a pretty high price guy. We pay big, man. We go big.
At that time, for yourself, you were paying top dollar.
Top dollar, man.
I will acknowledge that. But it still came down to where you could not afford health insurance, could not afford your rent, and the rest. So now, at least we've opened the dialogue of when we start talking about income. And
we got to be like Willie Sutton, man.
We've opened the dialogues because people need a certain level of money in order to function as even a poor American these days.
We need to be like Willie Sutton. Why are we going to the city and demanding the money? Because that's where the money is. Let me go and ask them for can I get a contract? Can I do it? They're not going to give it to you. Right. They don't have to. Right. They don't need you. Right. You got to get in position and decide to turn this spigot around. There's no sense while they're building all these buildings, you stand around like Tupac said. Because Tupac said this, I'll never forget, he said, you could be hungry and you'll see people you'll be standing around going, hello, we hungry, can y'all throw us a little crumb? And they'll keep going in and out, doing their things. And then eventually you'll go there one day and you'll be knocking on the door. We hungry, could we have something to eat? And they'll just go in and out. Does this all sound familiar? Think about it. People who don't look like you, men that are, white, they go in and out, they have everything. And Tupac said, one day you're going to walk to the door, kick the door open and say, look, give me the food, man. Nobody move, give me the food, man. Because we got to eat. And when you say that people need income, it ain't just for just to put money in your pocket. People need money to eat. People need money so they can live inside. People need money so they can live inside and see what's going on inside while they're inside. And all of these things take money. And they don't have the jobs.
Yes.
So they need to fix that. And there's no reason why a company like Con Ed, which is, they got a great gimmick going on. We're the biggest, we didn't know this, but we used to do business with them. We were partners with them on a project. They're the largest taxpayer in the state. That's why they get every increase that they want. So look at the gimmick that they use. Since they are the largest taxpayer in the state, the politicians are going to make sure they stay there. And then they're going to make sure, and this is electricity. You can't live without it. And for them to sit around and talk about in the healthcare, I think that is so disingenuous for them to sit around and say, "Oh, what's going to happen if you have one healthcare?" Nothing.
Well, if you're a
What do you mean what's going to happen if you have one health? If everybody can get on Medicaid, what do they mean something's going to happen to the hospital? Oh yeah, the price shit going to be cheap, ain't it?
Well, Doug, if you're a scholar, you
And I'm not.
see you see that this is about priorities, and we've never had any ordinary citizen priorities taken into consideration at any level by, as you term it, and I think appropriately, the white men who have been running this country. Never. Now we're going to have to, one, out of necessity,
Okay.
and two, because women, and I don't say this as a knock on women, I say it as a praise of women. Women want things to be nice for their families, their kids. And nice includes housing stability, medical stability, educational stability, food stability.
Well, then the first thing they're going to have to do is take winning out of the game. And I haven't heard any of that talk.
Well,
Have you,
but
Stu?
again, we just got a newly elected Congress,
I understand.
and I'll see
Give 'em
what
the benefit
happens
of the
in the
doubt.
next 2 years, because 2020, when Trump comes up for re-election, and several of these congressmen
I said you're gonna have
are
a shit show.
halfway through their congresswomen, congresspersons.
Oh, they all coming back up
have-
again. Oh, that's right. Got you.
It'll be very, very, or at least a third of the House will be up. It'll be very, very interesting, because I don't think you're going to stop this wave where non-traditional types go into the legislative bodies, and those non-traditional types are more than likely to be younger women.
Well, I think if they were really, really serious about helping the country, then they would have some sort of congressional term limit. Case closed. Because then you take the winning out. Then you go in there to do the people's work for.
You may hear that for the first time.
I think
just as the
the
people,
2 years a joke.
well, but people said that they didn't have it here in the city. Now we got it. Now they're talking about doing the set term limits for the state representatives.
They need that.
So it's spreading up.
They need
People are
that.
seeing that you don't want people sitting around
Probably
in the same
Grassley,
spot.
Grassley, and those dudes. It's
Because
ludicrous.
if you haven't helped anybody in 8 years,
You ain't gonna help nobody 8 more.
well, you are, but it's going to be yourself.
Thank you. Good point, Henry. Well, I was telling Stu and I was talking about it, I was going like, even if I wanted to run in at my age, I don't think my children or whatever, they wouldn't even vote for me. That's what to me and Stu had this conversation. I said, Stu, even if I wanted to run, I probably couldn't even get my kids to vote for me. They would go, yo, you're too old, why are you doing it? They wouldn't want you to do it. And so when I saw Grassley and all of them, I was going like, come on, those dudes don't belong.
Well, look at the president.
He don't belong there.
74 years old, and if people saw him this year as opposed to last year or the year before, you can see he's added about 50 pounds. He's aged considerably. Obama.
But he wears a good wig, though.
Well, that may be.
That
but
man wears a good
That
wig.
can only go so far.
Well, it's working.
When you have to go out in the sun and can't.
But he doesn't like to go out in the rain.
Right.
So he don't go in the rain because it messes up his wig. So he doesn't do that. That's
But
why he didn't go in
he's-
Paris.
He's 74, too old. Clinton, 70 plus, too old.
Jesus.
Joe Biden, 70
No,
plus, too old.
Too old. And here's the thing. I look at the thing with Pelosi and I go to myself, now, I like her because she got that healthcare shit through, man. I like her, man. I know they don't want it in there and all that, but if she was smart,
But she brings in the cash. There is nobody who's going to be kicked out or unappreciated as long as they bring in the big cash. And that is Nancy Pelosi.
well, I'm looking at a book that I'm looking up on your shelf up there, and I'm thinking that book is really apropos. It's called The Testing of Negro Intelligence. I would scratch out the word Negro and put in regular people, because that's what's going on. And it's nice, and then she's right, she's bringing the cash. But she's not going to advocate for stopping the winning bullshit that's going on.
But think about the Trump supporters. I would submit to you that even some of them are beginning to have doubts about how this white president will be benefiting the poor whites in this country.
Well, until you're actually right, I think so. But I mean, I think you got to get bigger than that. They have to understand the concept of income because they can't go with. That's what I'm saying. Somebody got to bring this all to the table and let them see for themselves. Stop. Don't blame. Forget about that left and the right. Go with winning and losing because people get that.
They're beginning to understand it a bit because so many of them have pre-existing conditions and healthcare problems. So they may not understand it about the other 95%.
Okay, so good.
But in Trump America, they're beginning to understand about healthcare, its cost, and the lack thereof.
Well, first of all, it has no business costing what it does. The system, and that part of the system is run amok. Because they should not allow people who fix us to make money off of that.
In a capitalist system, you may or may not do that.
I'm not saying. I understand
women
that.
will want things
I understand that, Heyward.
nice and protective for their family.
But I'm with you.
They're not going to put up with it.
I'm with you. But I'm saying I understand that. But all I'm saying is that it actually makes no logical sense. And if you were starting from right now, you wouldn't have that kind of a system. You wouldn't have a system where somebody could be a doctor and make a lot of money. You would be going like, you know what? Anybody that want to be a doctor that's taking care of us, we're going to take care of you. You know, you ain't going to be paying no taxes, stupid stuff. You ain't going to be paying no taxes. You ain't got to buy no car. You got tax-free money.
Canada has a bit of that system, and of course, several of the European countries have an even better system.
You get the brightest, they know who those kids are, those brightest and smokers, all of them are smart and bright. You get them, and the people who are fix us, they're special. They're not special because they have money, they're special because they're fixing us. And they miss that. That's so illogical to me.
Thanks to Trump.
Maybe something's wrong with me.
Thanks to
That's a side
Trump.
point.
Yeah,
Thanks to Trump, we're now having that discussion. So,
well, I've said before.
I mean, he's
the
so
best
bad
thing.
at
That's right, yeah.
squeezing so many people. We're now, even down in Trump country, having that discussion.
Okay, you have been listening to the voice of clarity, Mr. Dougie, and of course my man, Mr. Stu Reed, who's the actual producer of the show. And today he's come out with the executive producers, Doug Frazier and Heyward Dotson, to record a pro-pyramid version here at the pro-pyramid version of the Wisdom Table. Here at the West Side, Riverside.
And to reminisce.
And not only, and to reminisce.
Ceremonies of dark old men reminiscing.
Yes.
I'm pleased that we were able to revisit some of the good times, the good talk, and the spirit of our program, Issues in Sports, that ran several years ago. Not only do I think it's necessary now, as it was then, but I think the world has moved to a place where our positions are, in fact, much, much more relevant, and they were relevant even then, but they're much, much more relevant today. And I, for one, look forward to our future broadcasts and also to the new Congress, which I think it can have a very substantial impact on how our nation is going.
Remember, if you tune in next week,
you just might learn something.
Might learn something.
Okay.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.